When Darren Steele, a cocky black belt instructor at Ironclad Gym, noticed Erin, a quiet, grease-streaked mechanic, working silently in the corner, he saw an easy target for a mocking challenge. What began as a joke to entertain the crowd quickly spiraled into a moment no one could have anticipated. In the span of a single, deliberate move, Erin would freeze the entire room, shattering assumptions, exposing arrogance, and rewriting what respect really means. Sometimes, the most overlooked people carry histories that command silence and awe. And Darren was about to learn the hard way why strength isn't about noise or bravado. It's about presence, precision, and dignity earned in quiet battles most will never see. Just a quick little pause before I forget. If you like this kind of stories of overcoming adversity and justice, please leave a like and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to our channel so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. I guarantee you won't want to miss it. Now let's jump back in. The clang of steel echoed through the midday heat at Ironclad MMA and Fitness, a converted warehouse in Brookford's industrial district. The air smelled faintly of sweat, engine oil, and the faint citrus cleaner they used between classes. Most people there wore loose GIs or breathable gym gear. But Erin Cole, 34, stood out immediately. She wasn't dressed like a fighter. Her dark blue mechanics coveralls were rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms dusted with grease. A few streaks of oil traced faint lines across her cheek. Her hair, a deep chestnut, was tied back in a no-nonsense braid. A leather tool pouch sat on the bench beside her, next to a stainless steel water bottle and a pair of work gloves. She'd come to fix the gym's faulty air compressor, nothing more. But the hum of conversation shifted the moment Darren Voss, 28, the resident black belt instructor, noticed her leaning quietly against the wall, waiting for a staff member to sign off the repair job. "Hey, grease monkey," Darren called across the mats, voice dripping with that brand of teasing that wasn't meant to be harmless. "You here to fix something, or you want to spar? I could use a warm-up." The laughter from the class was light at first, harmless in tone, but it carried that subtle edge that told Erin exactly what they saw. A mechanic, out of place in a fight gym. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes met his for half a second, unreadable, steady. Then she went back to adjusting the strap of her pouch. That flicker of stillness didn't go unnoticed by one person, Liam Becker, 42, a retired Army medic who'd been leaning near the free weights. He watched Darren's grin widen, missing entirely the faint shift in Erin's posture. "Come on," Darren pressed, stepping forward onto the mat, playful but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Unless you're afraid to mess up those pretty coveralls." Erin's lips twitched, not in amusement, but something quieter. The room felt just a touch heavier. No one could have guessed that the joke had already crossed a line it shouldn't have. Darren's challenge hung in the air, the sound of it swallowed by the low murmur of his students. Most were still smiling, assuming this was harmless banter, the kind of gym floor teasing that burned off in a minute. Erin didn't move from her spot by the compressor unit. She crouched, unzipping the side pouch on her tool kit, her hands moving with quiet precision. A small socket wrench clicked softly into place. Her braid slid forward over her shoulder, catching a glint of light where a faint, pale scar cut across the back of her neck. Darren took her silence as fuel. "It's okay," he called, pacing like a showman. "Some people are better with a wrench than with their fists. Nothing wrong with that." The tone was casual, but he kept it loud enough for every set of ears in the room. A younger student, Maya Chun, barely 20, bit her lip and looked away. It wasn't the words, it was the way Darren said them. There was an edge there, the same one she'd heard when he dressed down a beginner for missing class. Still crouched, Erin reached for a bolt on the compressor housing, her forearm tightening as the wrench bit and turned. No defensive joke, no excuse, no visible irritation. Just the methodical twist of steel against steel. Liam, the retired medic, saw it again, the economy of movement. The way her grip shifted without hesitation, the way her shoulders stayed loose while her hands worked. Not the stiffness of someone uncomfortable under scrutiny, but the stillness of someone entirely in control. Darren shook his head, chuckling like a man enjoying his own stage. "All right, maybe I'll sweeten the deal," he said. "One quick round. Just for fun. You can even keep your coveralls on." Erin finally straightened. She didn't look at him, not directly. Instead, She set the wrench down gently on the bench, wiped her hands on a folded rag, and took a slow sip from her water bottle. Her gaze lifted just enough to meet his for one breath's worth of time. Something in that look, a depth Darren didn't understand, made Liam's jaw tighten. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was stillness. The gym had gone quieter, not silent, but quieter in that way a room does when people sense something shifting but can't name it yet. Erin stood with her weight balanced evenly, feet planted as though she'd been standing there her whole life. Her coveralls were stained in ways that told stories. Dark smears at the thigh from hours leaning against fenders, faded patches on the knees from working under chassis. But there was something else. The faint, almost imperceptible straightness of her spine, the subtle alignment in how she carried her weight. She wasn't posturing. She wasn't trying to look strong. She simply was. From the corner, Liam Becker's eyes narrowed. He'd spent enough years in military triage tense to know the look of someone who'd been in hard places. It wasn't a facial expression. It was in the breathing, the absence of wasted movement. Erin reached for the rag again, folding it neatly into thirds before placing it on the bench. Every motion was deliberate, economical. She glanced at the wall clock, then at the compressor, judging the time she'd need for the repair. If she was flustered, she didn't show it. Darren stepped closer, his bare feet whispering against the mat. "You don't talk much, huh?" he said, still smiling but with a slight edge now. "That's okay. I like it better when people let their actions speak." Her eyes lifted, not to meet his challenge, but to measure him, just for an instant. It was enough for Maya, watching from the sidelines, to feel something strange crawl up her spine. She couldn't say why, but that single glance made it harder to laugh along. Erin didn't answer. She set her water bottle down, tightened the strap on her tool pouch, and returned to the compressor. Only Liam noticed the faint outline beneath her rolled-up sleeve, the ghost of an old ink mark, its edges blurred by time. He recognized the pattern instantly. Erin's focus stayed fixed on the compressor, but her movements had slowed. Not because she was uncertain, but because something in the air had changed. She could feel the weight of eyes on her, the shift in the room's current. The socket clicked softly against the bolt. She loosened it with a slow, steady turn, then set it aside. Her hands lingered in stillness for a moment longer than needed. In the quiet between motions, she caught the faintest whisper of her father's voice, not in the room, but in memory. "Never give them the first swing, Erin. Let them step into you, and they'll never see the wall until they hit it." It had been years since she'd been on a mat, longer still since she'd been in the kind of fight that left more than bruises. But muscle memory never asked for permission to stay. It lived in the way her weight shifted without thought, the way her breathing stayed low and even. She rolled her shoulders once, a subtle release of tension. The faded scar on her neck caught the light again, and this time, Liam wasn't the only one who noticed. Maya's eyes flickered to it, then away, uncertain. Darren, oblivious, had begun bouncing lightly on his heels, more for show than anything. "I promise I'll go easy," he said, flashing the same grin he used on new students to mask condescension as encouragement. Erin didn't answer. She simply placed the last bolt on the workbench in a neat row beside the others. Her tools were organized with a precision that bordered on ritual. For the first time since she'd walked in, she looked at the mat, not at Darren, not at the crowd, but at the space itself. Measuring, judging distance. She exhaled slowly, as if putting something away deep inside herself. Whatever that was, it wasn't gone. It was waiting. The compressor sat open on its side now, pieces laid out in a perfect sequence on the bench beside Erin. She wiped her palms on her coveralls and took a slow sip of water. The liquid hit her throat in silence, but the sound of Darren's pacing seemed louder than before. Maya shifted where she stood against the wall. The playful smirk she'd worn earlier was gone, replaced with something more hesitant. She couldn't name it, but the way Erin's gaze lingered on the mat, not like she was afraid of it, but like she knew it, unsettled her. Darren rolled his neck, his confidence unwavering. "Tell you what," he said, "I'll even let you take the first shot." The chuckle that followed was met with polite smiles from a few students. But others weren't smiling anymore. At the far end of the room, Jared Holt, 36, a part-time assistant coach, crossed his arms. He'd seen Erin at the garage once before when his truck needed work. She'd been polite, quick, and no nonsense. Something about the way she moved now felt familiar. Not mechanically familiar. Militarily familiar. He caught Liam's eye, but the medic's attention stayed locked on Erin. Come on, Darren urged, grinning. I'll even spot you a point if you land it. Erin set her water bottle down with care. I'm not here to fight, she said, her voice level. It wasn't defensive, just factual, like stating the weather. Darren spread his hands in mock surrender. Of course not. But you could try. That landed differently this time. A couple of students glanced at each other. The joke had gone on too long. Liam's gaze drifted to her rolled-up sleeve again. The ink mark beneath it, not decorative, not casual, tugged at a memory he didn't want to name out loud. She noticed him noticing, and for the briefest second, Erin's eyes locked with his. It wasn't a warning. It was acknowledgement. The thud of gloves hitting pads from the adjacent training area had faded. Even those not directly in Darren's class had started glancing over. The air in the gym wasn't hostile yet, but it had lost its casual warmth. Maya folded her arms, trying to ignore the strange knot forming in her stomach. She'd trained under Darren for nearly a year. She knew his banter, knew the way he teased. But something about this felt wrong. Erin wasn't bantering back, wasn't flustered, wasn't anything. That nothingness was making it uncomfortable. Darren, oblivious, circled once, like a man playing to a crowd that wasn't as amused as he thought. All right, mechanic, he said. Last chance to show us what you got before I let someone else warm me up. Erin's braid slipped over her shoulder as she tilted her head just slightly, not toward him, but toward the mat. Her eyes scanned it again, marking the spacing between the taped lines, noting the angle of the sunlight coming through the high windows. She was measuring. Liam Becker saw it. Jared Holt saw it. Neither spoke. A pair of teenage boys sitting by the lockers stopped mid-conversation, watching Erin's stillness with curiosity they didn't quite understand. Darren clapped his hands once, sharp. Come on. Just one exchange. You'll be fine. She didn't move toward him. Instead, she reached for the rag on the bench, folding it into a perfect square. The room seemed to narrow in on that single motion. Liam exhaled slowly, the air passing through his teeth. He'd seen that kind of quiet only in two places, before a mission and before something irreversible. The others might not have realized it yet, but Darren wasn't asking a mechanic to spar anymore. He was asking for something he wouldn't understand until it hit him. The compressor was half reassembled now, pieces sliding back into place with a mechanic's shirty. Erin's hands moved without hurry, her attention divided between the task and the room she could feel watching her. Every click of a bolt echoed more sharply in the air than it should have. Darren had stepped away to grab a towel, pretending casualness, but clearly irritated that his teasing hadn't gotten the reaction he wanted. The kind of man who thrived on visible discomfort didn't quite know what to do when faced with a wall that didn't budge. Near the lockers, Maya's friend whispered. Why is she not saying anything? Maya didn't answer. She was watching the way Erin adjusted the socket wrench in her grip, not fidgeting, but rotating it the exact same way you'd rotate a training knife before a reverse grip. Liam's eyes tracked every movement, his mind pulling on old threads. The scar at her neck wasn't random. The faint ink under her sleeve wasn't casual. He'd seen that mark during his deployment in Marja, a small, disciplined unit known for getting dropped into places other teams wouldn't touch. People who carried it didn't talk about it. Ever. He looked at her tool pouch differently now. It wasn't military issue, but the organization was familiar, tools arranged not just for convenience, but for speed. No wasted reach, no clutter. As if feeling his gaze, Erin paused for the first time that morning. Her eyes lifted from the compressor and locked on the far wall, not at Darren, not at the students, but at the empty space above the heavy bag. In her mind, it wasn't a wall she was looking at. It was a stretch of pale desert horizon, the kind that made your eyes ache from the heat glare. The sound of the gym faded beneath the remembered roar of rotor blades. 12 minutes to drop. No second chances. The smell of oil on her coveralls was different here, cleaner, domestic, but it still mingled with the phantom scent of dust and cordite. She blinked once, and the wall became just a wall again. She tightened the final bolt on the compressor. The hum of tension in the room hadn't lessened. If anything, it had deepened. Erin knew this game, even if Darren didn't. She'd seen this dance before. The escalation born from underestimation, the false confidence of someone who thought they were the predator. He had no idea he was circling something far older, far sharper than his own experience. and the circle was closing. The gym's morning light cut across the floor in long, dusty beams, catching on Erin's profile as she stood and wiped her hands on a rag. She didn't speak, but her stillness was louder than Darren's voice had been all morning. Maya leaned toward Liam. You recognize her? Liam didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed fixed on Erin, but his mind had already slipped years backward to a briefing tent where a laminated folder had been passed around like it was radioactive. Inside, a grainy photo of a woman in dusty fatigues, helmet under one arm, chin slightly lowered. That same scar at the neck. He'd only heard the call sign once. Raven, a name spoken with the kind of respect usually reserved for ghosts. She was rumored to have been part of operations that didn't officially exist. Liam had never seen her in person back then, and now she was here, in a mechanic's coveralls, oil under her nails, quiet as winter. By the free weights, two younger guys whispered too loudly. Bet she's just one of those self-defense seminar types. Darren mopped the floor with her. The words didn't sting Erin. She'd learned long ago that strangers will fill silence with their own stories, usually the wrong ones. But she caught Liam's reflection in the mirrored wall. He was looking at her not with curiosity, but with the calculation of someone assessing capability. The rag in her hands had frayed edges. She folded it precisely, corners aligned, as if it mattered. Small habits like that never really left. Neither did the weight at the base of her throat, a chain hidden beneath the zipper of her coveralls. It wasn't a dog tag anymore, not officially. The engraving had worn faint from years of thumb pressure. She never took it off. Somewhere behind her, Darren laughed with the same easy bravado he'd started with, trying to shake off the feeling that he'd lost control of the room. But the air was shifting. Even the students who'd been smiling earlier now watched with narrowed eyes, their jokes dying on their lips. They didn't know why yet. They couldn't articulate it. But they felt the same thing Liam did, a quiet density in Erin's presence, like a coiled wire waiting. And though she still hadn't spoken a single unnecessary word, the ghosts she carried into the room were beginning to make themselves known. The steady thump of the punching bag in the far corner was the only sound now, its rhythm slowing as the trainee working it began to watch instead. Erin moved toward the workbench against the wall, picking up a small socket wrench to return it to its proper place. Her movements were slow, deliberate, not theatrical, but precise in a way that made people hold their breath without knowing why. Liam saw the fine white marks across the knuckles of her right hand. Not calluses from gym work, but tiny healed splits, the kind that came from striking without gloves, repeatedly, in conditions no training hall could mimic. He'd seen those same marks once on a man whose record was classified for 20 years. Darren, maybe sensing his audience was less certain now, stepped closer to Erin. Come on, Erin. One little round. You can tap out anytime. I'll even go easy. She didn't answer him right away. Instead, she set the wrench down, exact parallel to the edge of the bench, and only then turned. Her gaze wasn't challenging. It was flat, unreadable. You want to do this here, she said quietly. You put the mats down. No one gets hurt. It wasn't a boast, wasn't even framed as a warning, but the way she said it drew the attention of everyone within earshot. It sounded procedural, like she'd given that instruction before, in places where the consequences were not hypothetical. Maya shifted uncomfortably. She sounds like she's run this before, she whispered. Liam didn't respond. His eyes had gone to the zipper at Erin's collar. When she'd turned, it had shifted slightly, revealing the faint outline of something metallic beneath, the edge of a tag, catching the light just enough for him to see one engraved letter. It was enough. He knew exactly whose name it would be if she pulled it free. But the name didn't belong to the gym or to Darren's game. It belonged to corridors without windows, to briefings that ended with signatures in red ink. And if she wanted it to stay unspoken, Liam understood why. Around them, the atmosphere had changed. The eager smirks from earlier had drained away, replaced with an unease no one could quite articulate. They weren't just waiting to see if Darren would win. They were starting to wonder if Darren was even safe. Darren's grin was tighter now, though he tried to hide it behind an easy laugh. The crowd's shift in mood hadn't gone unnoticed, but he couldn't back down without losing face. All right, fine, he said, clapping his hands once as if to gather attention. Let's make it official. Quick spar. I've been wanting to show my students how to handle someone bigger in spirit than in size. There was no warmth in the joke, just the faintest edge of condescension, a thread that had run through every word he'd spoken to her since she arrived to service the gym's industrial fans that morning. Erin's hands stayed at her sides. She looked past him, scanning the mats laid out in the center. Her voice, when it came, was calm enough to be unsettling. "If we do this," she said, "when we're done, you'll apologize." Out loud. The way she said it wasn't a demand, it was a statement of terms. A contract. Darren tilted his head, caught between confusion and irritation. Apologize for what? She didn't answer. From the side, Maya shifted closer to Liam. "Why does it feel like she's negotiating?" she asked, almost whispering. "Because she is," Liam murmured. He'd heard that tone before, in places where words were the last step before something irreversible. The room's noise was gone now, replaced by the low hum of the ventilation system. Even the trainee at the punching bag had stopped entirely. All eyes tracked the stillness between the two of them. Darren rolled his shoulders, perhaps to shake off the weight in the air. "Fine," he said, a trace too loudly. "If that's what it takes to get you on the mat." Erin nodded once, but didn't move yet. Instead, she walked to the far corner, where a small canvas duffel sat half-hidden behind a rolled mat. She pulled it closer, unzipped it just enough to slide something small, no one saw exactly what, into the pocket of her work pants. Then she stepped toward the mats. Liam's eyes followed her the whole way. He didn't know exactly what she'd just pocketed, but he knew enough to realize it wasn't for the fight. It was for afterward. The crowd leaned in without meaning to. The fight wasn't just on. It had become inevitable. The mats lay flat and unassuming on the cracked concrete floor. A simple rectangle of blue and gray taped off with yellow lines that now felt like invisible walls closing in around everyone. The morning sunlight streamed through the high windows, catching dust motes that floated like tiny ghosts in the still air. Erin stood at the edge of the mat, her bare feet steady on the cool surface. The soft rustle of her mechanic's coveralls was the only sound she made as she shifted her weight. Her posture was calm and centered, as if she carried a quiet storm beneath the surface. Every breath she took was slow and measured, a silent preparation for what was about to unfold. Across the mat, Darren bounced lightly on the balls of his feet, his black belt tied tight over a fitted white GI. His grin was quick, but it didn't reach his eyes. Those showed a flicker of tension beneath the bravado. Around him, his students formed a loose semicircle, the younger ones leaning forward eagerly, hoping for a show, while a few of the older or more experienced faces wore furrowed brows, sensing something heavier in the air. Leaning against the far wall, Liam Becker crossed his arms, fingers twitching into a loose fist. His gaze locked on Erin, tracking every subtle movement. The brief flex of her fingers, the almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw, the faint narrowing of her eyes. He could read the signs of readiness, the calm before an inevitable storm. Maya, standing beside Liam, whispered to a nearby classmate, "She's not nervous. She's ready." Erin's eyes scanned the room, briefly meeting some of the silent faces, but she didn't seek approval or reaction. Instead, her gaze settled on Darren's chest, rising and falling with a quickening rhythm. His breath betrayed the unease he tried so hard to mask. "Remember," Erin said, her voice low but steady, carrying an unshakable confidence, "no one gets hurt." Darren let out a forced laugh. "Don't worry about me." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. A thick silence swallowed the room, a silence that stretched and pulled on the seconds, making time slow to a crawl. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Jared Holt, the assistant coach, shifted forward, his voice a low murmur. "This isn't just a fight," he said quietly. "It's a reckoning." Liam nodded slightly. He knew what was at stake. Not pride or ego, but something far deeper: respect, truth, and history quietly waiting to be acknowledged. Erin lowered herself into a fighting stance, feet shoulder-width apart, knees bent just enough to stay light on her feet, hands relaxed but ready. Her eyes sharpened with a calm, unyielding focus. The space between them seemed to shrink. Even Darren's swagger dimmed under the weight of that silent presence. The gym held still, the air thick with anticipation. And then, Everything was about to change. The noise of the gym faded into a distant hum, like the world had pulled away to watch something sacred unfold. Erin stood poised on the mat, her breathing slow and even, a quiet anchor amid the rippling tension. Every muscle in her body was relaxed yet ready, a coiled spring measured and waiting. The faint scent of engine oil and sweat hung around her, a reminder of the life she'd left behind the coveralls. Her eyes scanned Darren's stance, light on his feet, hands up, a smile forced but fading. He was the picture of confidence, but the sharp edge beneath it was unmistakable. Around them, the crowd held its breath. Students exchanged uncertain glances, sensing the shift but unsure what it meant. Maya's hands clenched at her sides, her heart pounding as she fought back the urge to intervene. Liam stood still, his jaw tight, eyes never leaving Erin's measured movements. He had seen this calm before, in places where survival wasn't a game but a question of life and death. Erin's fingers curled into loose fists, knuckles whitening just enough to show strength without strain. She flexed her wrists slowly, grounding herself deeper into the moment. Her mind flickered back briefly, a flash of a dusty training camp at dawn, the quiet determination of a drill sergeant's voice, the sound of distant gunfire echoing through barren hills. Then she was back, present and composed, a steady force beneath the weight of expectation. Darren took a breath and shifted forward, breaking the silence with a quick jab, more out of habit than intent. Erin barely moved, her eyes tracking the motion with surgical precision. The gym seemed to hold its breath again as Erin's body responded, a movement so fluid and controlled that it blurred the line between defense and grace. Her first step wasn't an attack, it was a statement. The atmosphere thickened, the subtle tension rippling like a stone cast into still water. Every witness felt the weight of what was coming, though none could yet say what it truly meant. And in that suspended moment before action, the quiet strength Erin carried settled firmly in the room, waiting to speak louder than words ever could. The late morning light shifted subtly as clouds drifted past the gym's tall windows, casting fleeting shadows that danced across the worn mats. Erin's breath moved slow and steady, a silent metronome that measured the fragile stillness hanging in the air, the quiet before a storm that no one could yet name. Darren's eyes flickered with a brief hesitation, a crack in his practiced confidence that only a few noticed. He moved carefully, circling with measured steps, muscles tense but restrained like a cat sizing up its prey. The room's energy was thick, electric, the kind that raised hairs on the back of the neck and sent small shivers across skin, though no sound disturbed the heavy silence. Maya's gaze bounced nervously between Erin and Darren, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt pulled into something far bigger than a simple gym sparring match, a lesson unfolding silently, one she couldn't yet fully understand. Liam shifted slightly, his fingers tightening involuntarily around the collar of his jacket. His years as a medic in combat zones had taught him to read bodies and breaths like open books. Erin's stance was speaking volumes even in silence, poised, disciplined, utterly unyielding. Today, she was not just the mechanic who fixed broken machines. She was a force of nature, measured and controlled, holding back an immense power, waiting for the precise moment to move. Darren feinted left, then right, trying to provoke any sign of reaction. But Erin didn't flinch or blink. Instead, she sank slightly deeper into her stance, grounding herself like an ancient tree with roots sunk deep into the earth. Calm, steady, immovable. Time seemed to stretch and slow. The usual gym chatter had vanished, replaced only by the sound of a bead of sweat trickling down a student's temple, the faint scrape of shoes on the mat. Then came a subtle shift, almost imperceptible but electric in its effect. Erin's eyes narrowed just the slightest fraction, focus sharpening to a blade's edge. Her fingers twitched briefly, readying herself, energy gathering beneath the surface. Somewhere deep inside, memories stirred. Late nights beneath harsh fluorescent lights, cold rain hammering tents, whispered commands in a language not her own. Her breath remained steady, voice silent, and presence undeniable. Everyone watching could feel it now, that charged moment just before action, when everything hung balanced on a knife's edge. And Erin was ready. Erin's bare feet settled onto the edge of the mat, toes gripping lightly, weight balanced with a grace that spoke of countless hours spent mastering the art of stillness. The worn surface beneath her shifted subtly with her breath, but the faint creak of the gym floor was swallowed by an almost sacred silence that had descended over the entire space. Her eyes fixed on Darren across the room, a man who had traded confident smirks for cautious scrutiny. His posture had tightened, and the gleam of bravado in his eyes was now tinged with something else, doubt. The crowd had fallen into an uneasy hush. The eager whispers of earlier were gone, replaced by a collective tension that wrapped the room like a thick fog. Even the most distracted onlookers were drawn into the moment, caught in the fragile balance of anticipation. Erin's hands hovered just above her hips, loose and relaxed, but every muscle beneath her coveralls was coiled with readiness. She flexed her fingers slowly, feeling the familiar sting of nerves and focus that only comes before a challenge worth facing, but she made no sudden move. Beneath the collar of her coveralls, a small glint caught the stray light, a silver dog tag, hanging from a chain that was invisible beneath her shirt. The tag flashed briefly as she tilted her head, revealing itself like a quiet badge of honor. Liam's gaze sharpened. He recognized the emblem etched into the metal, a symbol steeped in history and sacrifice. It wasn't just an accessory. It was a testament to a life lived in service, kept close and private. Darren shifted his stance, stepping forward cautiously. His voice, once brash and loud, had dropped to a thin edge. Ready when you are. Erin's eyes never left his. Slowly, with deliberate grace, she bent her knees and lowered her center of gravity, sliding into a classic fighting stance. Her body was a study in calm control, every movement honed to precision. The gym seemed to exhale as one, the tension in the room coalescing around that single shift. For a long heartbeat, Erin remained perfectly still, an island of unwavering calm amid the swirling anticipation. Then, with the faintest motion, she stepped forward. Her first move was not a strike, but a measured probe, a subtle test that carried the weight of experience, discipline, and respect for the fight to come. In that instant, the entire room froze, not out of shock, but in quiet, unanimous recognition. Erin was no longer just a mechanic, or the quiet woman who fixed machines. She was a warrior whose presence demanded acknowledgement. The moment was delicate, nearly invisible to untrained eyes, but it changed everything. And as silence deepened, the truth settled like a weight. This was a reckoning long overdue. The room seemed to pause as Erin's foot slid forward, a movement so fluid it barely disturbed the thick, tense air. Every part of her body was aligned, balanced, and controlled, like a finely tuned instrument, the result of years honing precision rather than raw power. Darren braced himself, expecting the usual rush of aggression, a barrage of punches and kicks fueled by bravado. But Erin's first move was nothing like that. With quiet efficiency, she extended her forearm in a smooth arc, tapping just beneath his elbow. The contact was soft but precise, more of a signal than an attack. The unexpectedness of it made Darren's arm jerk slightly, his eyes widening in shock. The gym fell into a stunned hush. Then, without hesitation, Erin moved again, each step deliberate, each motion carefully dismantling Darren's balance. She flowed through a series of subtle maneuvers, deftly redirecting his weight, slipping around his defenses with the grace of a dancer and the discipline of a seasoned fighter. Her style was starkly different from what anyone expected. It was clinical, almost surgical. There was no wasted motion, no showy flair, only efficiency and control, like a blade cutting precisely through resistance. The crowd watched, rapt and breathless, as Erin's quiet dominance became undeniable. Darren stumbled backward, his smug grin fading, replaced by disbelief. His body tensed with a dawning respect he hadn't anticipated. It became clear to all, Erin was no ordinary opponent. Beneath the grease-stained coveralls and calm exterior, she was a warrior who carried the memory of silent battles fought long ago. Her every move told a story of discipline, resilience, and hidden strength. Whispers rippled through the crowd. expressions of astonishment, questions hanging in the thickened air. Liam's gaze remained fixed on Erin's face, seeing far beyond the mechanic. To him, she was a living testament to a legacy told in scars, quiet endurance, and the power of restraint. The room seemed to shrink, the air charged with the undeniable truth unfolding before them. Erin's first strike was not just a physical act, it was a revelation. And as the echoes faded, the crowd's realization settled. This was no mere sparring match. It was a reckoning, a reclaiming of dignity, respect, and long-silenced truth. The gym fell into a silence unlike any before, deep, heavy, and reverent. It wasn't the sudden hush that follows a flashy knockout or a dramatic upset. This was different, a quiet that seemed to hold the weight of something long buried, now suddenly unearthed. Darren stood motionless, every muscle taut, the shock painted clearly across his face. His usual arrogant smirk, worn like a shield, was gone. In its place was a raw, hollow uncertainty that rippled through him like cold water. He looked around desperately, seeking reassurance from the faces watching, faces that no longer mirrored admiration, but something far more complex, a blend of respect, awe, and a touch of fear. Erin remained calm, her breathing steady and measured. She didn't shout or celebrate. There was no triumph in her gaze, only a deep and unshakable dignity, a presence that filled the room like a steady flame, quietly illuminating the truth of who she was. From the back of the crowd, a low whisper broke the silence. Jake, one of the younger students, murmured, That's Raven." The name hung in the air like a solemn oath, heavy with meaning. Liam's eyes sharpened with recognition. He knew the legend well, an operative erased from public records, a ghost who haunted classified files, whispered about in covert circles. The name Raven carried a legacy of skill, sacrifice, and silence. Maya's breath caught as pieces fell into place. Her voice trembled with realization, barely audible. The scar, the dog tags, it has to be her. Erin said nothing. No confirmation, no denial. Her silence was an answer all its own, commanding respect without explanation. The atmosphere shifted again, softened, almost sacred. Those who had mocked moments before now looked upon her with reverence, a silent acknowledgement of the strength and history carried in her presence. Darren swallowed hard, stepping back slowly. The fight had drained from him, leaving only the stark truth of his mistake. Liam stepped forward quietly, nodding with the unspoken respect of shared experience. "You didn't have to prove anything," he said softly. Erin met his gaze, her voice calm but firm. "Sometimes, the world forgets what it owes until reminded." The room exhaled, this time in acceptance, not of victory, but of a truth reclaimed. In that moment, Erin was no longer simply a mechanic or an underestimated woman. She was a living testament to strength carried in silence, battles fought without fanfare, and dignity restored without a word. The atmosphere in the gym shifted palpably, the silence breaking into murmurs and whispers that rippled through the crowd like a sudden breeze stirring still waters. Faces once painted with skepticism now flickered with a dawning respect and disbelief. "Is it really her?" someone asked quietly from the back, voice laced with awe and uncertainty. "Raven," another breathed, the name spoken almost reverently. "The legend who vanished years ago." Liam's eyes scanned the room, noting the subtle but telling signs that were finally being recognized. The faint scar traced delicately along Erin's forearm, illuminated by the afternoon light, was unmistakable to those who knew its history. The dog tags, half hidden beneath her shirt but shining faintly when she moved, were a silent testament to a life lived in shadows and sacrifice. Maya, her voice trembling slightly, took a tentative step forward. "You're the Raven. The operative who disappeared in the field years ago. The one nobody thought would ever return." Erin met Maya's gaze steadily, offering a slow, deliberate nod. Words felt unnecessary here. The weight of the truth hung between them, undeniable and unyielding. Darren stood frozen, a visible crack in his once confident facade. His voice emerged, low and strained. "I didn't know. I never imagined." His bravado dissolved completely. replaced by a palpable remorse that settled over him like a heavy fog. Around him, the students who had jeered and doubted Erin now looked upon her with awe and newfound respect. A few cautiously approached, extending hesitant hands in apology and admiration. Liam moved closer, his voice calm but firm. Some stories don't need telling to be known. She's earned every ounce of respect, and then some. Erin's face softened, a brief flicker of relief passing through her eyes. She scanned the room, noting the transformation etched into the expressions of those around her, faces reshaped by the undeniable truth they'd witnessed. "The world forgets," she said softly, her voice steady. "But sometimes it just takes one moment to remember." Her words settled like a gentle balm over the crowd, a lesson in humility, honor, and the quiet strength that endures unseen. As the gym began to empty, the atmosphere lingered, changed, deeper, more respectful. Erin was no longer simply a mechanic or a quiet woman working in the background. She was a symbol, a living reminder that true strength often lies beneath the surface, patiently waiting for its moment to be recognized. In that moment, past and present converged, forging a new beginning, one of reclaimed respect and restored dignity. The gym no longer felt like an arena. The tension that had filled the air moments before had dissolved into something quieter, more profound, a shared understanding that needed no loud declaration. Erin stood still, her presence calm and steady, carrying the weight of the morning's revelations with a grace that spoke louder than words. Darren, visibly humbled, lowered his eyes and took a hesitant step forward. His voice was low, threaded with sincerity. "I'm sorry," he said, the words feeling like a small but meaningful bridge across the gap he'd created. "I judged you unfairly. I let my pride blind me." Erin met his gaze steadily, her eyes soft but unwavering. "It's easy to forget what someone carries beneath the surface," she said gently. "We all have battles that no one sees, struggles that shape who we are in ways others can't imagine." The students around them absorbed the exchange in a thoughtful silence. Many nodded slowly, as if a veil had lifted and they were finally seeing something deeper, an unspoken lesson in respect, humility, and the strength found in quiet resilience. Maya stepped forward, her voice careful but sincere. "Thank you for showing us what strength really means. Not just the power in a fight, but the dignity in standing your ground with humility." Erin offered a faint smile, the kind that held a lifetime of experience and hard-won peace. "True strength isn't about proving yourself to others," she said softly. "It's about knowing who you are, even when no one is watching." Liam moved beside her, his eyes thoughtful and approving. "You reminded us all today, dignity doesn't demand attention. It earns it quietly, through presence, through character." As the crowd began to disperse, their voices lowered to reflective murmurs. What had started as a moment of confrontation had transformed into a shared lesson, one that would linger far beyond the gym walls. Erin gathered her tools and coveralls slowly, deliberate in every movement. Before stepping out, she glanced back once, a look filled with quiet knowing, a subtle acknowledgement of the battles she had fought and the peace she had reclaimed. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting warm, golden rays through the windows. The day had shifted, just as the hearts and minds of everyone inside had shifted with it. And in the silence that remained, one truth echoed clearly: true strength is silent. Dignity doesn't demand attention, it earns it. 3 months had quietly passed since that morning in the gym, a morning that had changed everything without fanfare or spectacle. The gym now felt different, imbued with a new energy that was hard to describe but impossible to miss. Respect, once withheld, had settled in like a steady foundation beneath worn mats and faded walls. Erin was no longer the outsider, the grease-stained mechanic who kept to the shadows. She had become a part of the community, quietly sharing her knowledge in a corner of the gym where the light fell softest. She taught small groups now, not just techniques and movements, but the subtle lessons woven through years of discipline, patience, resilience, and quiet strength. Maya was one of her most dedicated students, always observing, always learning. The admiration in her eyes was unmistakable, a reflection not just of Erin's skill, but of the dignity she carried with such effortless grace. Darren had changed too. The cocky bravado that once defined him had softened, replaced by a humility born from first-hand experience. He trained harder now, but with respect. Respect for skill, for character, and for the stories that shaped those who stood on the mats beside him. Liam continued to watch from the sidelines, offering quiet encouragement and guidance. He understood better than most that Erin's presence was more than a reminder of strength. It was a living legacy, proof that true power is forged in silence and tempered by character. One afternoon, Erin stood alone by the gym's large windows, watching the sun dip low behind distant rooftops. The golden light caught the glint of her dog tags beneath her shirt, a subtle reminder of battles fought, sacrifices made, and a past that still lived quietly within her. She was more than her scars or the stories whispered behind closed doors. Erin was a testament to resilience, a symbol of strength carried without need for recognition. True strength is silent, she thought, and dignity doesn't demand attention, it earns it. In that moment of quiet reflection, Erin understood the story she was living was not one of proving herself to the world. It was about carrying history with grace, teaching through presence, and reclaiming respect step by deliberate step. The gym had transformed from a place of competition to a sanctuary of growth, healing, and legacy. And as Erin left that evening, the soft glow of twilight casting long shadows across the floor, she carried with her a peace hard-won, a dignity restored, and a future quietly earned. 3 months had quietly passed since that fateful morning in the gym, a morning that had shifted the very air within those walls. The gym now carried a calm, steady energy, a sense of respect that had grown deeper with each passing day. It was no longer just a place for competition or challenge, but a space where strength took on new meaning. Erin's role had changed in subtle but profound ways. No longer the silent mechanic tucked away in a corner, she had become a quiet pillar for those willing to learn. Her teachings extended beyond physical techniques, touching on lessons of patience, humility, and the unseen battles every person carries. Among her students were Maya and Darren, both transformed in their understanding of strength. The arrogance that once drove Darren had been tempered by humility, replaced by a desire to respect not only the craft, but those who practiced it. Maya listened intently, inspired not only by Erin's skill, but by the dignity she carried so effortlessly. Liam remained a steady presence on the sidelines, watching with quiet approval. He and Erin shared a glance from time to time, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken truths they both understood, the legacy of strength not just in body but in spirit. Beneath her shirt, Erin's dog tags glinted softly in the light, a tangible reminder of the sacrifices and courage that shaped her life. Those tags told stories unspoken, memories carried with quiet pride and resilience. One late afternoon, as the golden sun dipped low, Erin paused by the window. Her gaze swept over the horizon, steady and thoughtful. True strength is silent, she reflected inwardly, and dignity doesn't demand attention, it earns it. That simple truth, profound in its quiet power, had become her legacy and the lesson she passed to those around her. Strength was not found in noise or boastful display. It wasn't the loud victory or the flash of violence. It was the steady, unwavering resilience carried in every deliberate step, the calm presence that held its ground without need for recognition. Dignity, too, was earned in silence, through actions that spoke louder than words, through respect built over time. As Erin turned from the window, the gym behind her hummed softly with life. The students moved with purpose, their own stories beginning beneath the surface, quiet, steady, and full of promise. In that moment, past and present blended into something new, a future shaped by respect, humility, and silent strength. Erin stepped forward into that future, her legacy not written in headlines or glory, but etched deeply in the quiet power of a life well lived. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive tactical stories.